Chapter 10. For 2 days we travelled the road to Worcester, camping last night by a fast-flowing river. Now, late in the evening, staring ahead, I could see on the horizon silhouettes of buildings, distant chimneys with smoke rising skywards. I pointed at the horizon, grunting my silent question towards Crow. "That is Worcester, Crach." Laughing loudly, he stood up in the wagon, holding the reins on high. "I was born there, Crach." He was very excited, hopping from one foot to the other as he tried to steer the horses. It's a good job that those horses were so used to their tasks, as the two beauties that pulled our wagon completely ignored Crow's frenzied misguidance. He jumped up and down, and I did consider that he may leap off the wagon in error, so I held out a hand to steady him. Crow playfully slapped my hand away, lost his balance completely, and fell headfirst off the wagon, landing in a less than graceful heap on the ground below. Had Crow not been a dwarf, of course, he would not have had so far to fall. As it was, he fell twice as far as would a man of normal stature. A cloud of dust appeared as Circus Master reined back his white stallion, coming to a stop next to the heap on the ground that was Crow. He dismounted quickly and rushed to him, bending over. Circus Master gathered the crumpled Crow into his arms, cradling him back to his shaking feet. Crow was stunned by the fall, and not a smile could be seen now as he rubbed a lump on his head that was growing by the second. Circus Master dusted Crow down with large gloved hands, as would a father picking up a wayward child after a tumble. "What happened here, Crow, you fool of a dwarf? If you had fallen under the wheels of this wagon, it would have been death." Despite our master's protestations, he was not angry with Crow. He really was concerned for his safety and well-being. Circus Master fussed over him, checking for broken bones whilst rolling up sleeves and trouser legs, rubbing his small limbs in order to recirculate the blood stopped in its flow by the shock of such a fall. "Looks as if all is well, Crow, apart from this lump on your stupid head." He lightly tapped Crow's forehead with a chubby gloved finger. "No real harm done, I wager." He lifted Crow back up to the wagon, dusting him down one last time. As Circus Master returned Crow to his seat, he looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "Take the reins, Crach, whilst this fool rests from his fall." He turned again to Crow. "Well, what happened, Crow?" Crow looked sheepish and tried to avoid Master's eyes, staring at the ground. "Well?" Master questioned him again. I'm home. I'm home again, Master. I'm home." Master smiled at Crow's answer. "So you got a bit too excited again, did you?" Master laughed loudly. "You'll never learn, will you? Every time we come to Worcester, you fall off the wagon in blind joy. It would be something I could understand if you had family who still lived, Crow, but you do not." Circus Master smiled and patted Crow on the back. "You are a silly dwarf, but I don't know what I would do without you, without any of you for that matter." He turned and, taking Mount of the stallion, sat erect in the saddle. Holding the reins in my hands, I was ready for my first attempt to drive a wagon. In his haste to ensure Crow's safety, Circus Master had forgotten to ask me if I knew how. Still, a dumb dwarf must have a go at these things. It's probably easier than trying to mime, which I had never done before either. "Do you have any idea how huge this wagon and its 2 horses are to a dwarf? Well, if you had never looked through the eyes of a dwarf, then you wouldn't, would you?" Circus Master turned the stallion on his hooves, dug in his spurs, and trotted to the front of the wagons. I cracked the reins, and to my astonishment and delight, my new charges walked on, followed by the wagon jolting forward with a lurch. Crow sat next to me, nursing his swollen head, looking just a little dishevelled following his recent encounter with the ground. We rode on for another hour under the last rays of the sun before entering the stone-walled town of Worcester. It was the time of the annual fair, and the road was busy with traders and farmers, wagons, sheep and cattle, all making their way into the town. The circus joined the convoy as clouds of dust rose from the road, making Crow and I cough. Wasp finally awoke from his slumbers. Here was a dwarf that could sleep through storms and the earth shaking. I had never known the like. Even though the light of the sun was now gone, we were afforded some illumination from the lamps that shone from many of the windows of the wooden thatched houses and cottages. Ramshackle shelters stood between larger dwellings. Craftsmen worked in open-fronted shops, beating leather, smashing anvils, orange and white sparks disappearing into the night. Burly men manhandled huge wooden casks of wine onto waiting wagons. The biggest building I had ever seen stood in front of us. It was so tall, seemingly reaching up towards the heavens. "It is the cathedral, Crach." Crow raised his head and smiled. "The monks there gave me sanctuary and helped me when my parents died. It was them who got me this job with my master. That was 10 years ago, Crach. 10 long years." Glancing at Crow's eyes, I could see some sadness as he spoke of his parents, now long gone in the mists of time to the other world, but not in the mind of Crow the dwarf. I squeezed his arm gently while miming my compassion for his loss. Yet he was so ecstatic when we were approaching Worcester, I was mildly perplexed at his mixed emotions, but no doubt Crow would tell me all in the fullness of time. He smiled as I squeezed his chubby arm and said, "So many happy memories, you know, Crach. So many." I pulled in the reins, and the horses came to a stop behind Strongman's wagon. The 4 wagons, together with 8 tired horses, stood in a line waiting for Circus Master's instruction. The high tides of the cathedral towered above us, casting a huge shadow over the light that shone from so many windows. "This is our usual spot, Crach." Crow pointed towards a large space next to a high stone wall adjoining the cathedral. "Same place every year," he continued. "Time to get unpacked and set up the circus for our show tomorrow." He jumped down, seemingly forgetting his recently bruised head following his fall from the wagon. He waved his arm, commanding me to follow. Gently, I lowered my small self to the ground, feeling very sore from so many hours riding the rickety, rut-filled road from Shrewsbury to Worcester. Pale Man was busy digging deeply into a large sack of oats, filling the horses' nosebags. Strongman, Blaze, and Wasp unloaded the big sail canvas in readiness for erection between the wagons to provide a canopy, which would shelter us in our performances later tomorrow. Crow and I released our horses from their harnesses and tied them to the rope strung between 2 poles. Circus Master's white stallion already had his muzzle deep in a nosebag, foraging for every grain, swishing a bushy tail in contentment. Pale Man, having hung a nosebag on each horse, now busied himself with folding and stacking harnesses into the wagon which previously held the heavy canopy. "Let's get some food ready for us, Crach." Crow jabbed playfully in my ribs as I followed him to the rear of one of the wagons. Crow climbed up and started to pass cooking wares down to me. Firstly, there was the big cauldron that would hold our porridge. Secondly, a huge wooden ladle, and finally a stack of bowls together with wooden spoons. Placing them on the ground carefully, I stood up only to hear Crow shout, "Catch!" I turned quickly, just in time, to see a sack of oats flying through the air towards me at speed. I held my arms out, stretched every muscle that my height allowed, and caught the heavy sack, its weight sending me crashing to the ground. Crow burst into hysterical laughter, holding his sides and jumping up and down. He then slipped on the wagon, sending him sprawling to the floor, landing next to me in a heap. Now it was my turn to laugh. We were both laying prostrate on the ground, giggling, when a shadow of a huge man cast itself from the ground across us. When I looked up, there stood Circus Master, staring down with a stern expression on his plump face. "Mucking about again, dwarves." He stood with his arms outstretched. "Get up and get on with your work. There's much to be done, and we have no time for children's games. Now get up." I staggered to my knees and gesticulated an apology towards him. He smiled at me and then turned towards Crow, bellowing a question loudly. "Dwarf, are you a musician or a jester?" Suddenly, Circus Master burst into laughter, while at the same time attempting to be serious, but it was impossible. He could not stop now. The three of us laughed and giggled until Circus Master, in the midst of frivolity, shouted, "Enough!" Trying to keep his face straight and posturing seriousness, he barked, "Back to work!" as he strode away, laughing and scratching his head. After the meal cooked and served by Crow and assisted by me, we washed the bowls and scrubbed the cauldron clean. Crow disappeared in order to practice his music with Wasp, whilst I went off in search of Strongman to see what tasks still awaited in preparation for the forthcoming show tomorrow. It had been a long day and night, and was now well into a new day. But finally all was prepared, and we had but a few hours left before the evening's performance was to begin. Pale Man and Blaze, accompanied by Crow and his drum, had disappeared into town in order to promote the show. I was quite tired, so took the opportunity of sleep for a little while, finding solitude between two sacks on a comfortable sheepskin at the back of one of the wagons. Such warmth and comfort led me quickly to sleep. I was awoken a little while later by Wasp shaking my shoulder and whispering, "Wake up, Crach! It is time!" I smiled and nodded my gratitude for his waking me while urgently scrambling off the sacks and sheepskins. Climbing down from the wagon, I took the huge ladle hanging on the water barrel and scooped cool fresh water, drinking furiously to quench my thirst. What I did not drink, I splashed over my head. Now that woke me up properly. I shook my head and rubbed my face back into life. Well, this evening's show was in front of us now, and with this thought I shivered with quiet excitement. It was now time to find Strongman. We had both practised well during the day, and he was pleased with my efforts. Circus Master watched all rehearse and made comments here and there, always supportive and encouraging us to become better and better at what we did. Mind you, it was in his and all of our best interests to perform well, so that the audience enjoyed the show, and thus rewarded us accordingly. Blaze lit the firebrands around the performing area, whilst the rest of us donned our outfits. It would soon be time for the show to begin.